Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tarek O'Dali from Business Review, and I will be your host. It is our pleasure to have Italtel with us today, who will be discussing carrier SDN, NFV in 2016. Today's guest speakers are Jason Marchek, Stefano Buero, and Giuseppe Monteleone. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar platform On24. You'll notice that this webinar is browser-based, so if you disconnect for any reason, please just click on the link that you received via email and you'll be able to rejoin the session. In order to ask questions, you can send them in at any time via the questions widget. Just type them into the box at the top left-hand corner of your screen and then click Submit. We will allocate around 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the session to address any questions or thoughts that you may have. Please use the yellow Help widget if you require any assistance, and you can move, resize, and maximize any of the windows in front of you to get a better view of the slides. But now, please allow me to welcome Jason.
Thank you, Tarek. Thank you very much. And as you mentioned, my name is Jason Marchek. I am with Current Analysis, and we have a distinguished panel today from Italtel, Giuseppe Monteleone and Stefano Buero. They will be talking today about SDN and NFV and a lot of the developments that need to happen, I think, in the second half of 2016 going into 2017 in order to help operators realize the benefits of what's going on in the market and the opportunities they have to transform themselves and to take advantage of new business opportunities. Before we move into the presentation, what I'm going to do is just give a very brief overview of, who I am and who Current Analysis is, and then maybe do a little bit of a level set in terms of what we've noticed in terms of market drivers and some hurdles that operators are dealing with, and then I'll hand over to the speakers to really go into depth on the, on the subject matter today. Current Analysis at a glance, if anyone on the line is not familiar with us, we're one of the portfolio companies within the global data portfolio of companies. We cover 100 markets. We have over 400 analysts in many industries. Specific to Current Analysis, we have about 100 analysts and focus very specifically on the telecom market. And so most of our experience, at least from the Current Analysis side of things, really is rooted in telecom. And I think from there, what we're going to do now is just move into the level setting portion of the webinar, and I think a lot of us in this industry have been watching the developments in SDN NFV applied to the carrier market for at least the last 3, maybe 4 years now, and some of these are really things that we all have seen and noticed with respect to the promise and why operators are really interested in adopting and implementing SDN and NFV technologies into their networks. Obviously, they have the expectation of reducing costs. More importantly, I think, changing their cost structure, the ability to switch their cost structure, switch their investment cycles, things of that nature, and then probably most important, the opportunity to generate new revenue. We definitely have heard all about the rising cost per bid and declining ARPUs and all that. And so the ability to generate new revenue, generating services, differentiate themselves vis-a-vis some of the competitive carriers and new market entrants is absolutely something that that operators are very much interested in. Now, what we've seen in terms of activities are a lot of POCs. Over the past 2 years, we have seen just a spate of operators kicking the tires on a spate of POCs, lots of lab trials, lots of benchmarking of vendors against one another and how they're able to, spin up VNFs and introduce VNFs into perhaps a third-party NFV or NFV infrastructure system. And obviously, we've seen a couple early deployments. And along those lines, I think, one of the things that sort of back this up in some of the research that we do is every year we run an SDN and NFV survey of operators to really find out where the market is, what operators are prioritizing, how they're, seeing the challenges and how they're meeting those challenges, and then obviously what they need from their suppliers to overcome these. And I think going back to the previous slide where we were seeing a lot of VNFs being trialed, this slide here is one of the survey results from our most recent survey. And you can see then when we ask the question of, what's your timeline for initiating commercial deployments of a variety of use cases, most of the responses came in sometime within the next 12 or so months. And so, what that means to us is that there is the requirement of vendors really to be able to bring a variety of capabilities to the table to meet a variety of needs in really an individualized basis for these operators. So not every operator obviously is going to commercialize every one of these use cases, but from our survey research it shows that across the board there's widespread interest depending on what the particular competitive challenges that a particular operator are facing. And so really I guess the key takeaway here is vendors need to be prepared to support a variety of capabilities, and that's obviously a challenge for them. And so that's something that I think we'll talk about a little bit more as this presentation goes on. Now, obviously, there's hurdles, right? We saw that there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of evaluation going on. Still a lot of strategy setting, but there are some concerns, and some of these concerns are fragmentation in the market, a lack of open and interoperable solutions. We hear a lot of development about all of the various open initiatives going on. Operators in some cases are taking the bull by the horns and putting together their own coalitions. And so, but what that's resulted in really is a situation where there's not necessarily one clear path forward. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, strategies are at very different points with respect to different operators and, their unique business challenges. And so what that's resulted in is, the ecosystem generally still, even, 3-4 years into this, being perceived as somewhat immature. Now, obviously, it's making progress, and we're seeing a lot of very interesting things in the first half of 2016 with respect to commercial launches of products and things of that nature. But still, there is some sort of a sense that that there's still some maturation to go before a lot of this stuff is ready for prime time. And what we see here is, a need to define ROI, and we'll put some data up in a minute here that will really validate this. But also rationalize objectives. We see, some operators that have talked about virtualizing 75% of their functions by 2020. That's not necessarily representative of the industry. So I think that a lot of different operators need to be very specific in where they begin to implement SDN or NFV and begin to start to kind of define their ROI model and take advantage of things in baby steps. Then obviously there's the sort of, perhaps you might call it the soft side of implementing SDN or NFV, and that's really the people skills. That's transforming their organizations, retraining their staff, and doing all of the things that really come with a complete change in operational mindset that's required. And we see a lot of the operators that have taken initial steps. That is one of the big challenges that they highlight is this need to retrain all their people and make sure that their people are operating in are operating as efficiently as they possibly can. And then also the ability to fuel innovation, and that's we're talking about again operational change, but change in the way services are developed and continually optimized. And so I think in a more agile environment, obviously there's some need to change there in order to fuel innovation and to keep up with the pace of change that's required to fully take advantage of virtualization. And now I mentioned the ROI model. Again, we asked some operators, what are the big challenges that you're facing right now? And I guess the predominant result that we found was insufficient ROI. And so then you can kind of go down the line and see organizational commitment. That's a big issue because we see that there's the operations management side of the house, and they have to change the way they do their jobs every day. Then there's the C-suites who sometimes we're talking about, if we're talking about a full-sale commitment to SDN or NFV, we're talking about a 5, 10, 15-year type of a process, and you have, operational, expectations that are really set on a quarter-by-quarter basis. So sometimes there's a little bit of tension there. And then obviously managing the organizational change is an issue. I think that if you look at these three results here, it really does follow a fairly logical order. Before you are going to think about managing organizational change, the ROI model has to be there. Before you're going to get deep and pervasive commitment from all the different organizations that have to commit, the ROI model is going to have to be there. And so I think that, obviously the onus is falling to the supplier community to help make that case, and I think that we're going to get into that in just a few short minutes. But before we do that, I kind of want to take the pulse of the folks on this panel, on this webinar today. We asked this question about 6 months ago, and these are some of the results we got. And so circa mid-2016, I think I'd like to just kind of do a refresh on this and ask this audience, what are your primary NFV deployment hurdles that need to be overcome in 2016? So I think at this point I'll pass it over to Tarek, and he will kind of walk us through the process of voting in this poll, and then we'll talk about the results a little bit. So Tarek, over to you.
Thank you very much. Right, now it's time for the first poll we'll be running in today's session. So audience members, if you could please select the answer that's most relevant to you, and then hit submit. So the question is, what is your primary NFV deployment hurdle that needs to be overcome in 2016? And the choices are operational change requirements, network integration hurdles, back office integration hurdles, technology acquisition and deployment costs, or solution immaturity. And audience members, you could go ahead and just select the answer that's most relevant to you and then hit submit. And I'll just go over the options one more time while you vote. That's operational change requirements, network integration hurdles, back office integration hurdles, technology acquisition or deployment costs, and solution immaturity. And I think that's probably enough time for everyone to have made their choice. So right now I'm going to go ahead and see what the results are. Thank you everyone for taking part in the first poll today. And there we go. Okay, so we can see that they're all fairly, quite even there. Jason, were you expecting that?
Well, I think that it does show some movement from where the previous chart. I think the previous chart was really talking about, the tech. There's probably an analogy to be made between ROI and technology acquisition and deployment costs. And so I think that what we're seeing here is, some of the nuts and bolts type requirements as operators, move into more, more deeper into deployments. Things like operational change and network integration actually do play a bigger role. So very interesting. Solution and maturity is I think something that is coming along. And actually, it's a good jumping off point, because now what I'm going to do is pass the ball over to the speakers from Italtel and really get into the reason why you guys all tuned in today, is to hear from them about the solutions that they're bringing to market and some of their philosophies on how to help operators to make sense of all this. So with that, I think I'll pass the ball right now to Giuseppe, and Giuseppe will give us his takes. Giuseppe, please.
Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us in this webinar. This is Giuseppe Monteleone. Before starting our discussion, I'd like to provide you a very quick introduction to Italtel. Italtel is a company with a long history. The company has been an important player in all the most important phases and the evolution of the telecom network, starting from the very beginning of the digital age. Later in the year 2000, we implemented our voice over IP solutions for telcos, and our SoSwitch was one of the market leaders. Later on in 2009, we passed to the virtualization, and now all our proprietary products are implemented as virtualized network functions. Italtel is also an agile company, adopting Scrum since many years. Now we are ready for entering the agile era, ready for the network transformation. We are at the same time a vendor and a system integrator. So we are able to provide the network solutions, integrating both proprietary products and third-party ones. Cisco is our reference partner. We have a worldwide presence with more than 100 active customers. We have business sites in 14 countries, and most part of the incumbent communication service providers are our customers. We are 1,300 employees, and about 1/3 of them works in research. Now going to the point, I want to introduce a specific argument, the innovation that can we introduce in the telecom network thanks to NFV and SDN. We know that we have a different possible innovation. Apart from the incremental innovation, that is the continuous improvement of existing products and solutions in a mature environment, we can apply a breakthrough innovation. This is the possibility to leverage on a new technology to improve existing solutions. But we have also the possibility to apply disruptive innovation. In this case, the new technology allow us to pursue market impact. So it's something that is game-changing, something that can even affect our social, private, or business lives. In this moment, we are working more on the breakthrough approach that is the norm today because it's naturally applicable to all the new deployments. But we think that the telcos have the possibility to apply a disruptive approach, leveraging the different strengths they have. For instance, the telcos have the network ownership. They can implement end-to-end service connectivity services with a guaranteed SLA. They are considered reliable, and they have also a large customer base. So it's possible for them, starting from the analysis of the customer base, to identify a lot of innovative new use cases and develop a strategic approach focused on market impact. If we go back again to the breakthrough innovation, I can show you a use case related to an implementation we did last year in the network of Vodafone Germany. In that network, we passed from an NGN solution to a virtual NGN. The solution was based on 6 physical network functions, 6 switches that were near the end of life, and we passed to 6 virtualized network functions deployed in 3 different data centers. The replacement was performed at feature parity with the persisting network, maintaining the same set of customers, 3 million of CPU users, and more than 100 of our PBX business trunking. But we gained a new operational efficiency. I can say that we have implemented a lot of use cases similar to this. And it's worth noting that in the most part of the cases, the operator does not provide a complete management orchestration framework. This allows us to say that it's possible to take the first move without having necessarily the full solution complete. So, if we look at the use case that are going to be implemented, we can see that service providers and vendors are mainly focused on existing application, pursuing cost reductions and operational efficiency. But we can also see that we have some examples of use case, for instance, the business virtualized CPE, the residential virtualized CPE network as a service, virtualized CDN. In this case, the telcos can achieve also market impact. But it's also possible to do more. In fact, the telcos are continuously seeing that the revenues associated to the traditional services are decreasing. there is a continuous decline in the revenues associated to the voice services. So they need to counterbalance this trend. They need to, on one end, they need to perform cost reductions. On the other hand, they need to tackle new market segments and adopt new business models in order to change their cost structure, generating new revenues. As an example of an interesting new market segment, we can mention the IoT. We know that many cloud companies like Amazon, Google, and etc. offer IoT cloud services. We know that also many telcos are going to offer connectivity services for the IoT. But we can also say that it's possible for service providers to do more, leveraging the network ownership and the possibility to implement new network architectures. For instance, one interesting proposal came from the Mobile Edge Computing Industry Study Group in ETSI. It's really an environment for innovation and value creation. The architecture proposed by the Mobile Edge Computing Group is based on edge data center that can leverage the proximity to end user or sensor actuators in case of IoT. This allows to obtain location awareness, low latency, and high bandwidth. If we have a look at the figure, we can see that it's possible to instantiate IoT gateways in the edge data center. These IoT gateways can also perform locally some control functions, immediately reacting to the events signaled by the sensors. While it's possible to maintain the IoT core platform in a centralized data center, and we can also deliver elsewhere the verticals. The same model can be applied to different services. For instance, to media services. In this case, we can think of applying transcoding at the edge. It is also possible to join the IoT with other services like contextual communication, and we worked a lot on use cases related to health. If we consider the new business models, we can refer to a different use case. In this case, we have a business cloud communication solution that can be provided as a service to enterprises. The enterprise can use a self-serve portal for performing the self-provisioning of the service. The service is implemented by a group of VNFs, an IP PBX that is virtualized, a WebRTC application server that is optionally included, and the virtualized session border controller that can implement also the connection to the IMS and GNA network in SIM trunking. So we can say that for small enterprise, the same group of VNFs is able to provide the service for many enterprises, small enterprises. While for large enterprise, we can dedicate a single group of VNFs. It's important, according to our experience of a VNF provider, to have a specific approach in developing the virtualized network function. First of all, it's obvious that they shall be integrated with the management orchestration framework. It is also important to adopt a declarative configuration methodology and also model-driven management, for instance, based on NetConf and Yang, in order to perform the configuration through the service orchestration layer. The last point that is really important, the VNF shall follow cloud design patterns, for instance, microservices, in order to achieve rapid elasticity and reliability. So we can say that it's important to consider the possibility to fuel the innovation in the service provider's network. We think that it's possible to approach the situation with a different point of view and a different mindset. So targeting mainly the customer needs and not only the technicality about the network functions. In fact, we can say that while in this moment we are working on existing solutions with traditional CRM, in the future we'll have the possibility to have plenty of new solutions and new services and the possibility to leverage on cloud-based business practices. Another important thing is that the VNF that we are implementing today works in a quasi-static environment, while in the future we have an highly dynamic environment in which the VNFS will be continuously instantiated or terminated according to the customer request. For the service provider, it will be possible to have a reduced time to market to quickly deploy new services. Also, the adoption of the DevOps methodology will allow to perform a continuous improvement of existing services. Another point is that we need to overcome the current silos-based organization, allowing the end-to-end service orchestration capabilities that can be applied to hybrid networks, because for many years we will have in the same network both physical network function and virtualized network function. Another point is that today many VNFs are implemented with a traditional software architecture. It would be desirable to pass to a microservice-based architecture in order to take advantage of the cloud environment, and also declarative configuration methodology in order to include the DNF in the service orchestration. The ecosystem today is dominated by incumbent VNF vendors, while we think that with the passing of time there will be more openness, and so new entrants, open source, even marketplaces, and also an agile procurement. The last thing is related to the possibility to have in the next future also a collaboration between different service providers, as is depicted in the lifecycle service orchestration of MAEF, that foresee multi-domain, holistic approaches to service orchestration across different domains, across different service providers. So I am going to conclude. I can say that, in my opinion, it's clear that NFV and SDN are here to stay. We have a delay in the implementation, but we think also that there is no need to delay the further progress, waiting for an ideal standardized network architecture. We can do immediately the first step. I think that it's important to apply organizational changes and also to have a forward-looking approach, considering the networks we will have in the future. At the end, I can say that the correct answer is pursuing innovation with interesting use case for end user. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Giuseppe. And so we're going to move into the second phase of our presentation, which is going to focus on more on the SDN side of things. And one of the key topics that we've noticed, have been paying attention to increasingly over the past, months and probably the last year or so, is the idea of SD-WAN. And so as we hand the ball over to Stefano, he's going to talk a little bit about that. And what we want to do before we get into that is maybe take another poll question and just take the pulse of the audience to see, what you guys think of SD-WAN and perhaps, how you're looking at SD-WAN as obviously an enabler to allow service providers and enterprises to be more agile in the use of different access connections. And so if we can pass the ball maybe just quickly back to Tarek to walk us through this poll question, we can get these results as sort of a stage setter to Stefano's presentation.
Lovely, thank you. And right now it's time for the second poll. As you can see, audience members, if you'd like to go ahead and select your answer, just click on that and then hit submit. And we will go over the question and the options here. So the question is, how will SD-WAN factor into your 2016 to 2017 plans? And the options are key part of SDN go-to-market plans, interesting concept but technology too immature, interesting concept but ROI still unclear, or no plans. And I'll just read the question one more time. How will SD-WAN factor into your 2016 to 2017 plans? And I think the audience have had enough time to make their selection, so thank you to the audience members who have voted. And I think now it's time to go ahead and see which option has won this poll. Okay, so the first option, key part of SDN go-to-market plans, is the winner.
The winner, indeed. Yeah, that's an interest. I mean, and that definitely matches the amount of interest that we've seen at Current Analysis in terms of people wanting, our own insights and our own opinions on SD-WAN is absolutely matches this result here. We did a webinar just a month ago on SD-WAN, and it was very well attended. But I think, as we hand it over to Stefano, do you have, or is there anything about these results that surprise you or encourage you? It has to be somewhat encouraging, I would suggest, yes?
So yes, basically it's something that I expected, because today software-defined WAN is a fact, is not only a promise. So I think that this is a good result for my opinion. Okay.
Very good.
Okay, so before starting, just a few words. The first aspect that I would like to underline is the fact that NFV, since the beginning, was driven by virtualization. So virtualization means basically cost reduction. But it's not the same for software-defined networking, because software-defined networking was driven, and is driven by a specific use case. The use cases at the beginning was in the data center environment, but now we see a lot of interesting use cases also related on the IP infrastructure. And the most important, the most interesting are coming from the enterprise market, but have a big impact also on for the service provider in terms of a new way to deliver connectivity services. So if we try to resume the drivers for the adoption of SDN and NFV for both service provider and enterprise, we can see that basically these drivers are complementary. So we have the service provider that need to improve their service portfolio, and to do this they need faster process to deliver new service, to create and deliver new services. On the other hand, we have the enterprises that need faster process to adopt new services, and they can adopt these services in a different way depending what the market is proposing to them in terms, for example, of cloud services, host and managed services by the provider, or services that can decide to implement internally. So to address this, they need a very flexible network. To better understand this point, we need to go a little bit in depth on what is happening today in the enterprises. So basically today we see the IT manager that is in a balance between resources and need. So he has big pressure on adopting new services, but we have to be careful before the adoption of this service, because he has typically budget constraints and limited resources. So if he decides to adopt a new service, but he don't have enough budget to set up the entire service delivery chain, it happens that the new service will be delivered with a poor quality of experience. And we know that a service with a poor quality of experience won't be used by the users, by the employee in this case. On the other hand, if he decides not to adopt, to not implement a new service, it happens that potentially he reduced the productivity. And what is in its mind to overcome this trouble? So the first thing is to have an access network, more access network flexibility. And the reason why is because the network, the access network is the bottleneck for the implementing on new services. Another important aspect is that they need a full harmonization between network and services, so that he can manage exactly the resources that he have with the resources that the application needs. And so in this way, he can have a smooth new service adoption. Okay, so basically, the new driver is, another driver is one optimization. So IT managers need one optimization. And one optimization is enabled by software-defined WAN. And we can consider the software-defined WAN as the matching point between the complementary needs that service provider and enterprises have. So if we have a brief look to the main benefits that the software-defined WAN enable, so we can see that for the enterprise is an interesting technology because allow them to have more resources in the network assets with a cost reduction. Today we see in the market that there are several technologies that enable this new approach. It could be technologies that can allow to build an overlay connections on top of the existing infrastructure, or are technologies that can replace the current infrastructure from enterprise point of view. But we see also that the software-defined WAN is an opportunity for the service provider, especially if he decided to bundle new connectivity services with IT services managed directly or hosted directly in service provider network. So here we have an example that is the dynamic admission control that Italtel has developed and is with an SDN approach. So Italtel developed an SDN application on top of the APKM controller from Cisco, and the application is called NetWrapper. So NetWrapper is able at the same time to interact with the network through the APKM controller and interacts directly also with the application, in this case with CUCM, so the Cisco Call Manager and Sky for Business, that are the system that manage the audio and video services. So basically, the APKM controller is able to provision the software-defined WAN functionalities on the border of the enterprise network, but at the same time is able to provide information to NetWrappers in terms of resources usage. So is able to provide information about, for example, the bandwidth that are used at specific class of service. And this information is used by NetWrapper to compare also the application needs, because NetWrapper integrates the call admission control functionalities of the call control. And so in this way is able to manage a dynamic admission control, because it can, from one side, change the policy in terms of call admission, so the bandwidth or the session that the system can allow in the network. And on the other hand, it can, through the controller, change the prioritization of a specific section. So in this way, we can have a very powerful solution that is able to provide new services, in this case collaboration services, with a high quality of experience, taking into account of the business application needs and also of the existing resources that I have in the network. So basically, we are using the same approach also to develop other kind of applications, so not only based on unified communication and collaboration services. And so the approach is to introduce in a smooth way SDN, having a little piece of orchestration at application level. So in this case, the Italtel net wrapper is able to interact not only with the software-defined WAN controller, but also with other kind of controller for specific needs that the app have. So an app can need to change something in the network, and to do this, need to have some information about, for example, topology or resources that are available on the network. So in this way, we can have this information that are available for several applications, and so we can apply policies starting from the application directly in the network, in the different part of the network, depending of the controller that I'm triggering with my application. So the final message is that again, we have not to wait for full standardization, but it is possible to introduce new services with a software-defined networking approach on the existing network. For sure, these first use cases are driven by the reference vendor that a customer has, but in any case, there is the possibility, in any case, to use SDN today, so without waiting for new standardization. Okay, so
thank you very much,
for your attention.
And thank you, Stefano. That was a very good presentation. And so I think that at this point we've ended the presentation phase of the webinar, and now we're going to move into the question and answer session. And some questions have been coming in throughout the webinar, so we have some questions teed up that we can ask. But there is still time for folks to submit their own questions. If you have any questions that have come to mind, or as the speakers are going through answers to some of the questions that have come in already, please feel free to use the Q&A box on the platform and enter that question, and we'll be able to see those and get to them as time allows. And so I think with that, what we're going to do is start asking some of the questions that have come in. And Stefano, as you were wrapping up the bit of your presentation, you mentioned that the reference vendor is going to help drive the initial deployments and help guide the operators in their strategy. And I think that really leads well into one of the questions that came in. So I think we'll start there. And the question that came in was, how can operators balance the upfront investment costs in SDN or NFV with the ROI models that generally call for a year or more for meaningful returns that are generated from some of the new services that are launched. So I guess what the questioner seems to be getting to is how do operators balance obviously the need to make a potentially substantial investment today to realize gains in the future, or are there things that they can do in the near term to really help accelerate the ROI model? And so perhaps Stefano, you can lead us off, and then maybe Giuseppe can comment as well.
Okay, so the first thing to say is that if I have the possibility as operator to start from scratch, so with a greenfield environment, so for sure I have to pay attention to standardization, and I have to implement a new network following that, because we know we reduce costs, but also we reduce probably operation and so on. but we know that this doesn't happen usually. So for sure, the reference vendor are the reference to start with a smooth deployment of software-defined network and network function virtualization. Because, and at the beginning, as I present during my presentation, so during my session, we can see that before implementing a strong functionalities like, for example, orchestration in the SDN environment, we need to have several use cases that are able to sustain the business. But again, we will start with little piece of that functionalities that are driven at the beginning only by the application itself. And so, moving on, I can adopt, I can develop a new application, I can adopt new functionalities, I can insert new controllers, but before doing it, I need to have very, very strong use cases and business cases.
Absolutely, very good. Giuseppe, anything to add to that answer?
Yes, I think that I agree with Stefano. It's really important to evaluate the ROI because now there is some immaturity in the solution. So there is the risk to make the first step being entrapped in a vendor-locked solution. Anyway, I think that we are proceeding with more speed respect to the past, and so it is a time to have the possibility to start without delaying the implementation because these things take time, and so we need to be able to shake the tree as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just to kind of add on our perspective here, and I think it really dovetails with what you guys have been saying, is that, you know, from our perspective, and some of the things that we're hearing in our conversations are that, you know, the level of trust between the supplier and the operator is very important because, you know, as you mentioned, you're going to have to start somewhat narrowly, you know, even to get things up and running, and then, you know, really what's going to have to happen is that initial instance or whatever is the starting point is going to be implemented and turned up and commercialized, probably, you know, without the full strategy laid out. And so to some extent, there's going to be the requirement to, you know, review strategies and kind of form them as the deployment goes. And so that trust between the supplier and the operator is extremely important because, you know, there's going to have to be, you know, you're going to have to start small and then you're going to have to develop into something larger and more complex. But the, you know, the trust to start, you know, without perhaps the entire strategy laid out is very important. And so I would agree. Now, another question that came in that I think is interesting that I wanted to touch on was, it was going back to really, I think, our first poll question regarding some of the adoption hurdles. And one of the adoption hurdles was managing organizational change, and that was something that was key on the minds of the, you know, of the participants in this webinar. And one of the questions that came in on the back of that is, what are some of the first steps that an operator needs to take in order to really transform their development environments, right, where they are today, kind of the waterfall type model? And this is really a question that's, you know, we've heard before, and the need for operators to adopt more agile development models, but there's, you know, there's some very challenging things that go along with that. So from your perspective, Stefano and Giuseppe, what are some of the things that operators need to be doing to start to move from that more, you know, traditional development models to the more agile development models?
Okay, that is a really interesting question because we are really active on agile methodologies because we adopt Scrum in our company, large-scale Scrum, because we have a great number of teams. And it's really important to note that it is still too difficult to implement continuous deployment where we are able to perform continuous integration and continuous delivery. Another problem is that it is not easy to create teams in which we have together developers and the operation people that work together in implementing a solution together. So if it's possible to use a term, we have a water Scrum fall model because the internal process we adopt is based on Scrum, but joining what happens outside our company, it becomes a waterfall model because we need to follow the different phases of the process. It's really interesting the fact that are seeing more attention from our customers to develop to the possibility to go agile. And this is the first thing that, in my opinion, we need to change. We are working a lot on these aspects with our customer in order to overcome this limitation. But I think it is difficult because usually the telcos are not prepared at the moment. Maybe in the next future they will be more prepared to this new opportunity. So the process, I think, requires some time in order to be completed.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you very much. We have a few minutes left, so if there's any more questions that are on folks' mind, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A widget. We've had several questions that come in that all speak to a fairly similar topic, so I'll try to summarize, I think a few questions that have come in along similar lines, and basically it is about readiness of open source solutions to be delivered or to be used in service provider networks. And so can you guys weigh in a little bit on, how ready are open source solutions and initiatives, and we know, the OpenStack, OPNFV, and all those, how ready are they to be used in production environments in service provider networks? We know there's a lot of ongoing work, we know there's a lot of trials going on, and we know there's a lot of participation from the ecosystem to really get that. But in a production environment, do you think we're there, or is there still work to go?
Okay, I can say that I am an enthusiast of open source solution, but I see that till now it's not easy for the telcos to accept them as carrier grade. But the open source communities are playing an important role, a determinant role, because starting from initiative like OPNFV, we have a group of people that is experimenting a new solution. And we need this phase of experimentation in order to guide the definition of the new standards. We need to perform this experimentation to obtain good standards. I think that OpenStack is going to be the de facto standard. With the passing of time, we see that with the availability of new releases every 6 months, it is possible to overcome all the weakness that still are persisting in OpenStack. So OpenStack will be, in my opinion, the reference implementation for the VIM, the virtualized infrastructure manager. Now we can say that we stay between two worlds equally important, the standardization groups and fora and the open source community. In the past, these two worlds were completely separated. Now I think that we can start to have a common objectives. It is a really interesting approach.
Absolutely, very good. And I think we have, probably time for maybe one, perhaps two more questions. So there's plenty here to get through. But there's one actually that came in. Perhaps I think it's for Stefano. It's about SD-WAN, and one of the questions was how much orchestration really is needed to take full advantage of SD-WAN. Now and how. I guess it's perhaps a two-part question, but let's take that first question and just maybe allow that to stand on its own. How much orchestration is needed to take full advantage of SD-WAN and for operators to deploy that as a managed service, perhaps?
Okay, so I think that the first step is just have an orchestration layer that is able to provision the SD-WAN functionalities on the border of the network of the enterprise. So to do this, probably we need just for a controller that is able to do this. Then we can have a second phase where we can have a sort of interaction between the controller for the WAN and the controller for the transport or backbone. But we see in this case, again, that is the application that has to trigger the two controllers to address a specific functionality. For example, the dynamic bandwidth requirements. So this is a common use case that we see. And to do this in the best way, probably we need that both controllers, so the IP network transport controller and the border controller, so the SD-WAN controller has to be in a certain way orchestrated. But I think that at the beginning is the application that can do this, gather information from the network, from the controllers, and then apply policy through the controllers on the network.
Very good. Thank you so much. And so I think we have about just 2 minutes before the top of the hour, and so I think that there's a few wrap-up items that Tarek would like to go through. So I think from my perspective, I'd like to thank both Giuseppe and Stefano for a very interesting presentation. I enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it, and I hope the audience did as well for the number of questions and the number of attendees. I believe that is the case. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and for your insights. And I think with that, Tarek, I'll turn it back over to you to wrap things up.
Thank you very much, Jason. So that just leaves me to thank today's speakers, so Jason, yourself, and Stefano and Giuseppe today for what was a great presentation, and of course to thank Italtel for sponsoring this session. To all the attendees, you're going to receive an email very shortly, and that will tell you how you can access the on-demand version of the webinar. And you can also access this directly through our website, and the website for you is www.business-review-webinars.com. Once this webinar ends, today's survey will appear in its place, and we would appreciate it if you could answer the questions in there for feedback. Let us know how we did today. Also, we look forward to sharing further webinars with you, so please do keep an eye out on the website that I just mentioned. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter, that's @BRWebinars for daily updates, and join our LinkedIn group, that's Business Review Webinars. To today's speakers, is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience very quickly before we end?
No, it's okay. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you again. Thank you for your attention.
Lovely. And thank you all once again from me, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for joining.
Bye.